Coming up on today's Next Fan Up podcast.
Why don't you just make the Chiefs your boyfriend? See if we can get the wheels to fall off that train.
There are some flaws there, and you're thinking, first of all, there speaks the man who drafted the greatest quarterback of all time in the 6th round and thinks it happens every week.
Can't go broke taking a profit, right?
But my top defensive guy is a defensive lineman from Miami, Jalen Phillips.
Talking with the other SuperFans, I don't think this is an extremely deep draft as far as like executive vice presidents of football or GMs go.
Even tucked away up here in the southern tip of Alaska, which is what everybody thinks Seattle is.
It's the SuperFan Super Mock Draft. Here we go.
Can you guys hear me? Sorry, hold on.
32 SuperFans.
I couldn't understand a word they were saying.
One Pod Vader.
You fired up for that, man? Huh?
Every angle of the NFL covered.
We on go time. We still on go.
This is Next Fan Up.
We're live, bro.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Next Fan Up podcast. Hey everybody, it is Pod Vader here, and I am proud to be a part of this wonderful experiment that we started many, many years ago. Yes, we are going into our 7th year of coverage here on Next Fan Up, which would mean this would be our 7th SuperFan Super Mock Draft. But this experiment actually started back in my days at ESPN when we originally collected the SuperFans. And I think we had at least 2 years of SuperFan Super Mock Drafts at ESPN. We might have had 3. I'm not 100% sure, and it's hard to search for, but you can definitely search for it. And you'll find some of the evidence of the SuperFan Super Mock Draft from the days of yore at the 4-Letter Network. The point of this experiment has never been to predict what each team is going to do on draft day, April 29th. No. The point of this has always been to give a larger voice to the fan. What do you want to see happen on draft day? What players do you see your team needing to draft on the first night, on the second night, on the third night? This has always been about more than just an exercise of futility. This has been about looking at the players, seeing what their values are, what their talents are, and how those talents fit into the holes that your favorite NFL team have. And we've done it once again. Now, we've had less participation from the superfans than ever before. It was a little more than half of the superfans made choices, but you're going to hear from less than half of the superfans on this particular podcast. For that reason, going back to those ESPN days, one of the things I always thought made that show special was you had the voice of a player, you had a voice of a scout, and you had the voice of the fan. In this particular case, we're going to have the voice of the fan, but we're also going to have the voice of draft expert Brian Bosarge of deepfrieddraft.com to come join us and provide some draft analysis, plus a very special guest, former NFL general manager Randy Mueller is going to join us as well. We have over 3.5 hours of draft coverage coming to you, starting with this part 1. We split up the SuperFan Super Mock Draft into 3 parts. So part 1 here is picks 1 through 12. Part 2 will feature picks 13 through 20. And part 3 will feature picks 21 through 32, plus the 3 picks that didn't happen for teams out of the first round, with an extensive conversation about the Texans and their situation. So sit back, relax, enjoy your favorite beverage. Here comes Randy Mueller. And so it is my pleasure here in one of the final SuperFan Super Mock Drafts that I may be a part of, that we are joined by a very special guest. It is a gentleman with over 30 years in the NFL as a general manager for the Seattle Seahawks, New Orleans Saints, and Miami Dolphins. I am very honored to announce Randy Mueller here as our guest on Next Fan Up. Thank you so much, Randy.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this, and I enjoy talking ball on any platform, so I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, Randy, let's just jump right into it. Sort of the concept of our mock draft isn't so much to predict what is going to happen a week from today on April, 29th? I don't even know what the date is anymore.
Yep, you're right, 29th.
Does anybody know what a calendar is anymore? I'm not sure.
No kidding. No kidding.
But but the purpose for us is to sort of give the fan a voice. Sort of, who is it that they want to see get drafted by their favorite team? Where do they see the holes on their team that need to be improved upon? You recently wrote a great piece that was picked up by Peter King and some other media outlets. What are the actual NFL general managers doing with mock drafts right now?
Well, I can only speak for this one. I don't know how other teams use it, but I've sure come to love them. I like them. I don't think they're I don't think we can have enough of them for us. When we would prepare in the draft room, once our work was done and our boards were set, I always set aside 2 or 3 days, and that I would invite our guys to collect all the mock drafts they could, right? From fans, from media, from everybody. And we would just spend time going through all these mock drafts one by one and following it down our draft board. I just felt like it presented every kind of scenario imaginable, right? I mean, we might laugh at some of the drafts, but it really doesn't matter. It helped us prepare. So consider it like a dress rehearsal, like a scrimmage, and we might have 50 of these over the couple days. And I guarantee you what happens is it reveals scenarios that promote discussion. And that's all I'm looking for at that point is more discussion. I want to have thought everything through. I want to have been able to discuss all the options we have and in plenty of time frame so that we're not having this discussion on draft day when we're on the clock for 10 minutes. I wanted to discuss this all throughout the process, getting ready for it. And then on draft day, frankly, the draft room that I've always ran has been pretty quiet. There's not a lot of discussion because we all know what we're going to do as the cards come off the board because we've kind of prepared for all of it. So I use these mock drafts to prepare in any way we could for all the unforeseen things that drafts bring us year in and year out.
And so, as I mentioned, the new format of the SuperFan Super Mock Draft features a draft analyst, and he is a friend of the show. He comes back, while it's only his second time, we still consider him a friend. It's Brian Bosarge of DeepFriedDraft.com. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to be back on the podcast here and ready to get into this mock draft.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing this. I mean, this has been my baby since I was at ESPN. To take 32 different guys and have them act as the general manager of their team, to me, I'm trying to get a better feeling of what the fan wants and what the fan is expecting their team to do. What I'm hoping what you can do is to provide some of that analysis of the player and say, how well did the fan do here? Is the fan on point? Does the fan need a little bit of help? And as we're going to find out, since half the fans don't exist anymore, we'll see how well I did acting as the general manager for some of these teams.
Sounds good. Let's get ready. Let's ready to rumble, as they say.
All right. Let's go, Mr. Roger Goodell.
With the first pick in the NFL draft.
And with that first selection, the Jacksonville Jaguars will select the quarterback out of Clemson, Trevor Lawrence. Random Twitter user says, I heard Gruden loves him. I wonder which random Twitter user that is. This is the locked in stone, once in a generation quarterback. Pretty much after his freshman year, this was going to be the pick no matter what team. And I was thinking about this, and I might be right in saying I think every team except for the Kansas City Chiefs, if they were in this spot, would have selected Trevor Lawrence. Is that too bold a statement, Brian?
I don't see where you're wrong here. Trevor Lawrence, I started Deep Fried Draft in 2012. That was the Andrew Luck draft, and Trevor Lawrence to me is the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck came out. It's almost a sure lock of being successful that you can have at the drafting a quarterback in the first round. I can't see anything wrong with this pick at all. Trevor Lawrence, like you said, you can prick your finger and write this baby in blood. It's done.
So now this is where things are going to get fun. Let's go to the second pick in the SuperFan Super Mock Draft, where the New York Jets will select Zach Wilson, quarterback from BYU. And this might be where I, as a Patriots fan might differ with, say, our Washington football team super fan. And we'll get to his comments a little bit later on. But I think it was a bad idea for the Jets to move on from their young quarterback for another young quarterback. I just don't get it. I don't agree with it, considering that there were those 3 wide receivers and Kyle Pitts here. So you can surround your young quarterback with weapons to make him better. But the Jets are going to jet. This is where rookie quarterbacks go to die. And unfortunately, Zach Wilson, welcome to New York.
Well, if you're Zach Wilson, you have to hope that since the Adam Gase stink, maybe hopefully they fumigated and got him out of the building, cleaned up that. But that's the beauty of the rookie salary cap now, is you can admit basically you made a mistake with Sam Darnold, and you can move on and this quickly, because you're literally 3 years removed from spending a top 3 pick on Sam Darnold. Now you're about to do it again with Zach Wilson. This is another one where I think you can write this one down in ink for sure. It's going to happen. This one's locked in. Zach Wilson's going to be the starting quarterback next year for the New York Jets. There's a lot to like about Zach Wilson. His mobility, his arm strength. He's accurate. He can make plays off script. I wish he had better down the field accuracy, so to speak, but Zach Wilson, I think, can be a successful NFL quarterback. He's just not the slam dunk that Trevor Lawrence is.
I mean, the Jets are going to have to make other moves here, right? I mean, they can't go into the final rounds and go all defense like the Jaguars did previously. They've got to bring in, or was it the Panthers? I don't even remember anymore. They got to bring in more weapons here. The weapons that they currently have are just not enough for Zach Wilson to have any success.
Well, fortunately for the Jets, is they have a lot of draft capital, not just this year, but next year. They have the 23rd pick in the first round from the Jamal Adams trade coming over from Seattle, so you can look to add a receiver or maybe an offensive lineman there, just to build around Zach Wilson, give him some more comfort there. You have some extra day 2 picks, I believe, in this year's draft, and you have, like I said, you have the extra picks next year as well. So, they may be, not a great team this year, but you have to look at the picks that they have, and if they can hit on 75% of those picks, then you got to feel good about the trajectory of the Jets franchise.
I mean, if you were the general managers of the Jets, would you have stuck with Sam Darnold and taken, say, Kyle Pitts? Would you say Kyle Pitts is the best prospect available other than Trevor Lawrence?
On my board, Kyle Pitts is 4th. Okay. And it's the tight numbers, but Kyle Pitts is 4th on my board. He's behind Penei Sewell, Trevor Lawrence, and Jamar Chase. Those are my 1, 2, 3, 4 on my overall board coming into this draft. I love Kyle Pitts, but if I was the Jets, and if you're asking who I would pick here, it would be Justin Fields, but we'll talk more about him in a little bit.
Okay. I'm intrigued by that, Brian. Let me talk to Randy here for a moment. Now, the story of this particular draft, I think, is going to revolve around the quarterbacks. I think it's pretty much been written in stone. Trevor Lawrence is the number 1 pick in this particular draft. It's pretty much been written that way since his freshman year at Clemson. Mm-hmm. And now we've got these other guys. We've got Zach Wilson. We've got Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. Mm-hmm. And let's start with the Jets scenario, because this is where I'm one that believes that the Jets did the Jets. And granted, I'm a Patriots fan. I've got some bias here, but To me, I think the Jets made a mistake moving on from Sam Darnold. And when I look at a quarterback, and one of our other super fans, Neil, has mentioned this, is you have to evaluate the quarterback is he one of the all-time greats? Does he elevate the talent around him? Or is he a guy that can get the job done and still get you to a Super Bowl, but isn't necessarily elevating the talent around him? To me, okay, I know that Sam Darnold may not necessarily be one of the greats. I still think it's early in his career, so I still think there's time to see that develop. But I do know that he has enough talent that if I put the right talent around him, he can be successful. And that's where I think the Jets have faltered here in the past few years. I know former NFL people don't like to go down this road, but I will say talent in New York was just not very good.
Right. No, I agree with you. I think it's been unfair. It's been an unfair assessment of Sam Darnold, and I'm with you. I've been carrying the Sam Darnold flag for the last year. I think I enjoyed watching him coming out. I did the full assessment on him. I was a national scout for the Chargers my last 10 years, so I did the full study on him. I think since he's been at New York, their plan, if it was to ruin his career, that's pretty much what they've done. They gave him no chance to succeed there, really because the talent around him was bad. So now they made the decision to move on. And the reasoning was they wanted to reset the financial clock, right? A new quarterback gets a 5-year contract when he comes in. You can keep him at a lower salary. And they thought Sam was going to be cost prohibitive at some point. We'll see if that works out, because if you take the other end of the spectrum, Carolina had to have had Sam Darnold on their board right now. They'd rather have him than a quarterback at 8, because that's where they pick in the first round. So their assessment was totally different. And most of them are. When you make these trades, both teams have to agree to them and probably see them slightly different as talent is evaluated. That's for sure. I think the thing about Zach Wilson is I do see special. I think he's a level 2, level 3 quarterback coming out. And what I mean is he does advanced things as a pocket passer and as a mover out of the pocket. And it's really the things that he does is hard to teach and it's hard to coach. So I think they haven't taken a step back, in my opinion. They've moved ahead a little bit with him, but I didn't see a big difference in talent between Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson. I'll be honest with you. Time will tell.
At number 3, the San Francisco 49ers made this dramatic move. They're picking number 3. Now, at the time of the recording that you and I are doing, most of what I have heard is that Mac Jones is going to be the pick here. However, there are clearly 3 other quarterbacks, and it is also fairly clear that because of the amount of value the Niners gave up to get to this spot, it's going to be a quarterback. There's probably no way that they moved up this far just to get an offensive weapon or Penei Sewell. Again, my thinking here, similar to the Jets, I still think it's a bad move because I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a guy that can give you success and has shown that he can bring your team to the Super Bowl. He may not be a quarterback that makes the weapons around him better, but if you surround him with the weapons, he can find success and bring you to the promised land. That's my thought process. I think this is way too much to give up for a quarterback. And in this particular case, if we're talking about Mac Jones, you and I talked before, so I already know you have the lowest grade on Mac Jones out of these 5.
Yeah, that's correct. Obviously, in the building in San Francisco out there, they don't believe that Jimmy Garoppolo is good enough, or they would have not made this trade. I mean, there's just no way around it. There's no way they view it that way. And to me, you don't give up 3 first-round picks plus other picks to come up and draft a guy with the ceiling of Kirk Cousins. I'm not disparaging the name of Kirk Cousins or anything. He's a solid NFL starting quarterback. But are you trading 3 first-round picks right now for Kirk Cousins? No. And that's what I feel like Mac Jones is. I think that's his ceiling in the NFL is that of Cousins. And if you were to believe betting odds and such of that nature right now, like I believe DraftKings, I looked at it yesterday, Justin Fields is now the betting favorite to be the 3rd overall pick. If that's the case, that's who I had in my last mock draft going to San Francisco. Probably who I'm going to have in my final mock draft going to San Francisco is going to be Justin Fields. And to me, I just think he's the second best quarterback prospect in this class. But Mac Jones, there's just I cannot see Kyle Shanahan and company making this trade up to select Jones.
It's been kind of tough to talk because all these the story of this draft is clearly the quarterbacks, and to group them all together would really be the way to have this conversation. But there is a way to group at least 4 of them together, because with pick number 4 in the SuperFan Super Mock Draft, the Atlanta Falcons are going to select Justin Fields, the quarterback from Ohio State University. So you believe that Justin is the number 2 quarterback, not Zach Wilson. I find that interesting.
I love everything about Justin Fields. I love the way he plays the game. His athleticism, his arm strength is huge. I go back, and I've stressed it enough. I mean, I know you can't judge a quarterback off one play, but if you go back to the Clemson game in the national semifinal, he just makes one move slightly in the pocket with the rush coming down on him, makes one move to his left, steps up, and just drops one of the most beautiful passes you'll ever see to Chris Olave into the end zone for 60 yards in the air. I love it. I love Justin Fields. I watched this tape 2 years in a row now. I only had one bad game of the 7 of his that I watched that I thought, okay, and this was his the 2019 game against Michigan State. I thought he had a bad game that week, but the rest of it, everybody has a bad game. But Justin Fields, to me, if he's the pick at 4 for Atlanta, I love it. I mean, the last time he was in that building, Georgia had him on the punt team running a fake punt, and they lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game. That's the last time he played in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. If he goes to Atlanta, he won't play this year or he won't start anyway because Matt Ryan has a uncuttable, untradeable contract, so he's going to be the starting quarterback next year with a $45 million dead cap hit. So, but Fields would get to sit behind Ryan, a professional at every level, and learn the nuances of the NFL. If Fields slides to 4 somehow and is the pick for Atlanta, I love it. Home run.
Let's hear what MJ had to say about his pick here for the Falcons. All right, MJ, with the 4th pick, you take one of the 5 quarterbacks, Justin Fields from Ohio State University. We have said for weeks now on this particular podcast, good luck with that Ohio State quarterback. On top of this, if I'm going to slam the Jets and I'm going to slam the Niners for doing what they're probably going to end up doing, then I got to do the same here with the Falcons, man. I mean, you have Matt Ryan. Why do you need Justin Fields?
Because Matt Ryan will not be here after 2 years.
Yeah, that's 2 years.
He's going to be gone. Also, with as much money that we have tied up in his contract, our best bet, granted, I'm no football GM, but I think our best bet is to get a damn good QB out of the draft that we'll have on a rookie contract until we're done paying Matt Ryan. Because Matt Ryan, I think, has got 2 more years left on his deal. The rookie deal will be 4 years, with the 5th-year option. So I think we'll get some good – Fields will be behind Matt Ryan, learning from what I would consider one of the best in the game. He'll get some good playing time during preseason and the offseason, and I'm sure there'll be some packages that Arthur Smith is going to run where he'll bring in Justin Fields, who is definitely a more mobile quarterback than Matt Ryan is.
I mean, I don't know, man. You're picking number 4. You still have the best the guy that people are saying, other than Trevor Lawrence, is the best player available in Kyle Pitts, who could come right in and help you produce at that tight end position, which, I mean, you guys have had a long list of great tight ends, especially over the past few years. I mean, it'd be Matt Ryan's whoopee right there and Kyle Pitts.
But who's going to throw to Kyle Pitts when Matt Ryan is gone in 2 years?
Don't worry about 2 years. Worry about today.
No,
I want to compete today.
I do too, but I'm not willing to risk. I mean, granted, it's not like I'm in that position, but I'm looking at the future of my franchise. I mean, absolutely, we want to compete right now. And I think with some of the offseason moves we've made, plus coming back this year, we're still bringing back Julio Jones. We're still bringing back Calvin Ridley. I think the 2 of them with the rest of the receiving core will be sufficient to be competitive. Are we Super Bowl bound? Of course not. Are we playoff bound? Maybe. But at this point, I just want us to be competitive again. And I honestly think we'll be more competitive in the long run going with Justin Fields. Now, I looked up Trey Lance, and I like his stats. I haven't seen him play very much, so that's one of the reasons why I didn't.
No one has seen him play very much.
But again, with Justin Fields, he's local, so I actually had a chance to see some of his game tape from when he played in high school. I've seen a little bit of his play when he was at Georgia before he went to Ohio. So I'm very confident naming Justin Fields my pick.
All right, that's fair enough. I mean, I know one of the biggest problems that the Atlanta Falcons have had, because I was one of the teams that helped start it, and that's you guys get a big lead and then you just blow it. So defense has got to be on the top of your mind here.
Absolutely, and they've made some good some good acquisitions this offseason on the defensive side of the ball. As long as we keep Grady Jarrett, who's the anchor of that defense, and we've made a couple good picks in the secondary, I think the defense will be okay. Plus, we've got the draft pick from last year. I don't know if he pronounces it Terrell or Terrell, but I think he's going to come up big for us. So, yes, the defense is always a concern of mine because of our performance historically. But I like the decisions that the defense has made the last couple of years. I think they have – I won't say I think they figured it out, but I think they've made some progress into figuring it out.
Are you okay if somebody comes knocking on your door and says, "Hey, Atlanta, we'd like to take number 4 off your hands there. Here's a nice package for you." Would you be okay with trading down?
Depends on what that package. Well, depending on what that package is, yes, I would be. I'm still. It truly depends on what that package is, because that package has got to include a good young quarterback, because we're in a quarterback-driven league now, and if your team doesn't have a stud of a quarterback, I don't see you being very competitive. So yes,
your team already has a stud. You want 2 studs. You can only get 1, MJ.
One of those studs is going to be gone in 2 years.
Oh, man,
you could always make the argument that he's only got 1 year left, but I don't want to risk not being able to get a quality QB because of what Matt Ryan's contract, because of what Matt Ryan's contract has done with our cap space. I really think a quarterback in the draft, again, he's going to be on rookie salary, so we don't have to pay him as much to make up for those last couple of years of Matt Ryan's salary.
All right. I've got a Stephon Gilmore and pick 15 for Matt Ryan. I'll let you keep number 4 so you can draft Justin Fields.
Wait, so what do you want if I get to keep pick 4 and draft Justin?
I want Matt Ryan.
Okay.
I'll give you Stephon Gilmore and pick 15.
Okay, done.
Done? Man, that was nice.
Done.
Rob, that one. Wow. You are really out on Matt Ryan. You are just out.
I love Matt Ryan. I love what he's done for my team, but I make it a point to always put the goal of my team over an individual player.
By the way, if the New England Patriots are listening to this right now and the Falcons are down for it, just so you know, it's pick 15 and Stephon Gilmore. We get Matt Ryan and we're golden. We're set. I'm a happy camper. Oh, my God. I'm overjoyed with that trade. I'm back in the playoffs, baby. Woo!
You might be back in the play, but you know what, though? Honestly, I don't see the Falcons. I see the Falcons possibly making the playoffs this year. Possibly. If possibly making the playoffs means that, or let me rephrase that. If trading away Matt Ryan and I get to keep pick number 4, and we're going to get a good cornerback, I'm okay with that.
And I wish I hadn't pre-recorded with Randy Mueller, because I'd love to run this scenario by him. I have a feeling there's no way in the world I'm getting Matt Ryan for 15 and Stephon Gilmore. But hey, if I do, I would be overjoyed.
But my thing is this. See, and here's where I think I'm probably different from a lot of people. If you're going to take that contract and I get cap space back, have at it. Take him.
All right.
He is a $40 million cap hit this year. Right, I think it's $40 million. Is he either $40 million this year or $40 million next year? But either way, that's $40 million off the books that I can spend somewhere else. So take him.
That's the thing. I think you get the cap hit this year. It's next year you be without a cap hit.
Gotcha.
I think everything accelerates to the current year in a trade. So you still get the cap hit, but it's a lot less moving forward. All right. Well, listen. You're all in on the quarterback. You like Justin Fields.
Yeah.
So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And congratulations to me. I don't need to make the 15th pick, but I'm still going to make the 15th pick. But woo, Patriots have Matt Ryan. This has been the greatest SuperFan super mock draft ever, except that we didn't make this trade, so it doesn't count. All right, MJ, have a good one.
All right, thanks. You too, Pod.
Now, Brian, I'm not a fan of using this high draft capital on the lottery ticket. My thought process is I've got Matt Ryan. I may not like his contract, but it's the contract I did sign him to. And Matt Ryan is still performing at a high level. If I can get, say, Penei Sewell here, or again, any of those wide receivers or Kyle Pitts, I think I've made my team better and ready to compete now. By taking Justin Fields, not only have I not added to my potential of competing right now, but I have to wait before he's actually going to get on the field. And by the time he gets on the field, I have to hope that my general manager is good enough to keep my roster to a point that Justin Fields will be able to compete at the same level. So you're not picking at number 4 again, say when Justin Fields is the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons.
Well, there's 3 thoughts here, and I'll expand a little bit on each. First of all, you do have a new general manager and a new head coach in place in Atlanta. So that thought process being, okay, they didn't sign Matt Ryan to this contract, so they want to try to get away from it. 2, if you told me there was any other player other than, like, say, Fields and to a lesser extent Trey Lance, if you took either one of those at 4, you could sell me on. Like I said, I love Fields. I like Lance. I don't love Lance, but you could sell me on either one of those as your quarterback of the future because you're not expecting to pick this high again, right? I mean, that's the plan. You don't want to pick in the top 5 again, so we might as well pick our future quarterback while we're here and build around, the rest of it. But if I'm not taking the quarterback here, because I still think Matt Ryan can play at a decent level of quarterback in the NFL. So if you draft Kyle Pitts, who I think would be the pick here if it's not the quarterback or a trade out, I'm also not ruling that out either. But if they stay and don't pick the quarterback, I think Kyle Pitts will be the pick here because you put him in an offense with Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones. That's pretty good.
It's not bad. As we move right along with the SuperFan Super Mock Draft, pick number 5, the Cincinnati Bengals select the offensive tackle from Oregon, Penei Sewell. Wide receiver options here are quite tempting. Kyle Pitts as well, but I think you need an offensive line to make sure your star quarterback doesn't get hurt again. And you already mentioned it. He's number 2 on your board.
Actually, Penei Sewell is my number 1 overall player on my board.
Ooh,
number
I like
1.
that.
I even have a higher rater. I have a slightly higher. It's like 100th of a point, but he's a slightly higher ahead than Trevor Lawrence. But if the Bengals pick Penei Sewell here, as a Bengals fan, lifelong Bengals fan, I'm okay. I'm not upset. I'm happy. It's great. We've got our future starting right tackle, left tackle. What doesn't matter. He's a fixture, potential all-pro on your offensive line. But right now, I'm about 45% here on Team Chase as far as the Bengals go because, and not to spoiler alerty your mock draft here, but as I go through the rest of this first round here, just looking at it, the board would fall great for the Bengals to get a potential starting right tackle at pick 38 in round 2. And I think the depth of the offensive tackle position far outweighs the depth of the potential number 1A wide receiver depth in this draft. I think there's a lot of slot wide receivers available later on as we go to the second round, third round, than there is top number 1 wide receivers. So that's kind of why I lean to Jamar Chase here. But like I said, if the Bengals can't lose here, if it's Jamar Chase, if it's Penei Sewell, if it's even Kyle Pitts as the 5th pick in the draft, the Bengals can't lose here. They've immediately upgraded their team.
I'm going to bring Randy Mueller back in here to talk about offensive tackles. And something you talked about on a recent podcast, Randy, was how you had a fallback. And I think this is something that fans should really start to embrace. And you talked about during the draft, you would fall back to the big guys or the speedy guys as targets to take in your draft, because those are the guys that are getting the money. Talk a little bit about that and talk about these offensive tackles in Penei Sewell and Rashawn Slater. And I know there's some other guys that you're interested in that haven't been getting a lot of the press.
Well, I just think if you're going to draft value, which you have to do nowadays with the money we're talking about, you've got to draft these big players. And if you go around the college football everywhere, the big cats are the teams that win, right? It's who has the most big guys, and that's on both sides of the ball up front. The Alabamas, the Georgias, the Auburns, for say, the Oregons, those guys have big offensive linemen, big defensive linemen in their NFL style. So those are the kind of guys that I would look to draft. Or I would look to draft fast guys, because I think those are the guys that get paid. And to that end, I think you've got to draft tackles. I don't know that you can draft a center or a guard anywhere near the top of this draft, or any drafts for that matter, just because the value isn't there, in my opinion. You can't pay everybody. But it's been proven you have to pay tackles to get them. And therefore, to get a good one, I think you got to draft them high. And we've seen this year in free agency, some of these receivers that have got paid, really the fast guys got paid first, because they're few and far between. And when I say fast guys, they serve a purpose more than being a productive receiver. They make people defend you different. So it's just always been my philosophy that if we have a fast guy out there, I don't care if we never throw him the ball, they have to defend you differently on defense. And he opens up your running game. He opens up all kinds of things. Now, you're talking to a guy who used the 9th pick in Miami on Teddy Ginn, but he did play 12 or 13 years. And again, that's why, because he's fast. And you saw John Ross get signed by the Giants this year. And everybody kind of, whoa, wait a second, what are they doing with John Ross? He was a bust. Well, he's a fast bust, and he's still going to serve a purpose to the Giants, I'm telling you. So that's a little bit of a sleeper there. But I like the Penei Sewell, the Rashawn Slater. There's another kid that I like that's at Alabama, and it depends on when you saw him this year. I've heard some scouts not so high on him, but he finished the season really strong, which means something to me, and that's Alex Leatherwood, a tackle at Alabama. I'll tell you this, anytime you get one of these Alabama guys, and since Nick has been there, you're getting a well-coached, fundamental sound, really good football player, and that means a lot as well. I don't think you can go wrong with these players. I don't care which sides of the ball they are, especially on defense, because Nick, frankly, is the best defensive guy I've ever been around. And I think you gain value from that. So I would pick a Leatherwood at some point. But again, I'm focusing on tackles, especially in that top 20. That's who I want to draft. Big defensive linemen that have versatility and offensive tackles.
At pick number 6, the Miami Dolphins got here by trading with the Niners and then trading with the Eagles. The Miami Dolphins will select the tight end from Florida, Kyle Pitts. This was done by our superfan Ron. I mean, this seems like it's the when is the draft actually going to start? When are the other players going to go after the quarterbacks? And it looks like this is where it begins. Picks 5 and 6.
I've consistently mocked Kyle Pitts to Miami, and I love the fit there. You're surrounding Tua, because you basically, by trading out of 3, you have said that, okay, Tua's our guy, because we traded out of the quarterback derby here. Bunkering down with Tua as your starting quarterback, which I agree with. He was coming off the injury last year. He looks shaky at times, but I want to see him as 100%, full off season, fully recover from his injury before I pass judgment on Tua Tagovailoa. But give him Kyle Pitts to pair with the other super athletic tight end they have in Mike Gesicki. You can draft another wide receiver, probably, maybe even with the 18th pick. Maybe, into the second round, you can get another wide receiver to go with Devontae Parker. But I think giving Tua all the weapons he can, and especially someone like Kyle Pitts, who has the catch radius of a rings of Saturn, it would be outstanding.
Randy, Who in this draft, besides Trevor Lawrence, do you see as a big difference maker for their career? Who do you see as a potential all-pro on a yearly basis?
Well, I think the guy that jumps to me is Kyle Pitts. I've said this on my podcast and in my blog as well. He's not really a receiver. To me, he's not really a tight end. He's everything. He's a weapon. And I think he's going to be a nightmare matchup. He'll be a 3-down guy. The thing about him is he can be, you may be able to run with him at certain things or put a big guy on him, but you still can't do anything about it. You can still throw him the ball. I think he's a guy that's going to be available whether he's covered or not. And I think he's got Pro Bowl written all over him. My comparable for him was Megatron, the Detroit receiver. I think that's really what this guy is. He's big, he's fast, he can make all the plays. The other guy for me is Penei Sewell, the offensive lineman from Oregon. Those two guys, to me, really good talent. I think have Pro Bowl early in their career written all over them. So I love those two guys. There's some other guys that figure in down the road for me, but I don't think it's a great draft for blue chip players. And maybe that's another reason these quarterbacks have been pushed up a little bit as well.
Pick number 7, the Detroit Lions will select Jamar Chase, wide receiver from LSU. Our superfan Josh says it's Chase or Waddle here. I don't think the new regime will take a tiny wide receiver. It all comes down to how they feel about Chase opting out. If they don't care, he's the pick. Otherwise, it's Waddle. Are these 3 wide receivers, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, are they interchangeable?
I wouldn't say they're interchangeable. They have different skill sets that make them intriguing to all. But if you told me each of these 3 would be the first wide receiver off the board, it wouldn't surprise me if it was any one of them. It's Jamar Chase for me. And if you're Detroit, you just lost your number 1 receiver, Kenny Golladay. You basically have a bunch of number 2, number 3 receivers on your team. You don't have a number 1 receiver anymore. If Jamar Chase is the pick here, which I think he would be in the scenario that we've laid out here, it's a home run pick for the Lions, who will be, ridiculed mercilessly for, consistently drafting receivers in the top 10. But, that's neither here nor there.
Let's hear what Josh had to say about this particular pick.
A couple different ways that the Lions could go here, but I think the most obvious and logical move would be to get some depth in the receiving core after the Lions signed both Brashad Perriman and Tyrell Williams. Love the Gazelle, but it's probably not an ideal number 1 and number 2 wide receiver pairing. It could be fine for this year and good for those guys for being kind of the main focal points here in the receiving front. But I do expect them to add someone very early, whether it be round 1 or round 2. I just think that this new coaching staff with Dan Campbell and a bunch of these other former NFL players are probably not going to be quite as high or excited picking a guy like Devontae Smith, who absolutely showed all the explosiveness and talent and route running ability in the world last year during his Heisman winning season. But I just think when push comes to shove, that the Lions are going to end up going with a receiver that's a little bit bigger body, that's a little more versatile, and hopefully someone that they can stick in the slot, because Brashad Perriman is best served on the outside, and you could say the same with Tyrell Williams. I mean, those guys are pretty similar in their abilities and kind of what they do well as far as the receiving tree is concerned. So playing on the outside would make the most sense, and being able to put a guy like Jamar Chase in the slot is just an absolutely phenomenal weapon to add to the team. This defense is atrocious, so literally they could draft anybody. But I just don't think with the 7th pick, there's going to be a difference maker that's worthy of that pick. If they do go defense in the second round, or first round rather, I'd rather it be after a trade back. But this is kind of the state of a team that has no depth, that got absolutely worse in the offseason by moving on from Matthew Stafford, which is another reason I think someone like a Jamar Chase would make sense. I would prefer Chase or Waddle to Devontae Smith personally, and I feel like the coaching staff is going to feel the same way. But getting a guy that can catch some passes underneath with T.J. Hawkinson also in the fold, I expect a big year here also from T.J. Hawkinson. But it's a situation that definitely needs improving. And a guy like Jared Goff that's struggled to throw the deep ball with success in the NFL is probably going to continue to struggle with, outside receiving targets like a Tyrell Williams and a Brashad Perriman. So those guys, when you add into the mix the only other depth that they have, which is Geronimo Allison, and also Quintez Cephas in his second year. Still some upside for Cephas there, but I really don't think we'll see much of that. They targeted him 10 times in week 1 of 2020, and that was the most by far he'd seen in a game the rest of the year. So kind of weird that they went away from him after he had some success in week 1. I really don't think we'll see much this year from him. It'll probably have to develop into the offseason next year. In 2022, we'll maybe see what Quintez Cephas can bring to the table. But for 2021, I do think my Lions go with a wide receiver with the 7th overall pick for exactly those reasons.
At pick number 8, the Carolina Panthers are going to take Devontae Smith, wide receiver, Alabama. Now, I admit, because I was the one that made this choice here, that I might have made a mistake and should have gone offensive line. I actually do think that this is a strong candidate to trade out of this particular spot, especially since they have their quarterback now. But still, adding another explosive wide receiver weapon to the offense will make this a sneaky team in a competitive NFC South.
I think you're dead right on here when you say this is probably going to be – this may be the first spot where we see a trade out if it's not Atlanta at 4, because I think you're going to see some teams that like Patrick Surtain, the corner from Alabama, that they know they need to get ahead of Denver. They know they need to get ahead of Dallas for sure, and Carolina is in prime spot there. I think you could see someone like the Chargers, that if they really like Surtain here, move up to 8. Devontae Smith, to me, you have the questions about his weight, but his route running, his hands, his speed, you don't question any of those things. I mean, he's a tremendous player at Alabama. He's going to should have a really good career in the NFL. But to me, I don't want to say he's similar to DJ Moore currently at Carolina, but it may be a bit redundant here. If Carolina stays, I think Rashawn Slater, the offensive tackle from Northwestern, may be in play here, or they may like Patrick Surtain as well, the corner from Alabama, and they may just sit at 8 and take him themselves.
To me, it was a difficult decision for sure. And like I said, I do think that this is a position where they can say, you know what, we want to load up for a run. We want to get more picks. So we're going to trade down. To me, I just think that would make the most sense for the Carolina Panthers in this particular position. But you can't fault them for loading up with weapons either. All right, at pick number 9, we have the Denver Broncos, and I made this pick for them as well, and I chose the offensive tackle from Northwestern, Rashawn Slater. I don't buy that they want to move on from Drew Lock, and Trey Lance is still on the board. I just don't think Trey Lance would be an upgrade to Drew Lock at this particular point in time. Maybe down the road, Trey Lance would be an upgrade, but I'm a guy that wants to compete now. That's my thought always when I'm acting as a general manager. I thought about another wide receiver pick here, but they have a good young core already. Also thought about defense, but I think providing Drew Lock with a little bit more protection is the priority pick here for them.
Oh, I agree with the players selected here. If Denver does in fact stay at pick 9, I think Rashawn Slater, if he's on the board, is the pick. You pair him. Garrett Bowles has emerged at left tackle for Denver in the last couple of seasons, and I think Rashawn Slater can be an upgrade on the right side for sure, if not potentially an all-pro. Some teams may view him as a guard, and he has all-pro potential there, similar to Quentin Nelson a few years ago, where played tackle in college but moved inside. So I think that would be a great selection for Denver here. I think that they are, if you told me there was a team that was going to trade up with Atlanta, if Justin Fields was on the board, I think Denver would be probably the betting favorite there as a team that would move up to 4. But staying put at 9, Rashawn Slater's on the board. It's a great pick for Denver.
At pick number 10, the Dallas Cowboys will select Patrick Surtain, the cornerback from Alabama. Kevin made this selection. I heard this being said on by some other analysts. The Cowboys have got to be thinking defense. They've got to tie up Jerry Jones. They can't let him get swayed by the potential of adding Jalen Waddle to their team. They have to make sure that he just goes defense. To me, I think Patrick Surtain would be the best defensive player on the board. I don't know what your board looks like, but that's the way I would look at it.
Surtain is certainly my top corner. I would have to look quickly to see who my top defensive player is, but Surtain would definitely be at or near the top of that for sure. If you look at every mock draft, most every mock draft available out there, Surtain to the Cowboys is probably the most mocked pick of any in the top 10 to one team outside of Lawrence and to Jacksonville and Wilson to the Jets. It's almost so foregone a conclusion at this point that it probably won't happen. But let me throw some fun with what you said about tying up Jerry Jones. Would it shock me if Jerry Jones traded up from 10 to, I don't know, maybe 4 to Atlanta or 6 to Miami, who we've heard there's reports out today that Miami's fielding offers to trade back from 6. Would it shock me if Jerry Jones says, hey, I want that Kyle Pitts guy, and he goes up and gets them for their offense? Would it shock me? No. It's a splashy Jerry Jones move, isn't it? But, but I think the Patrick Surtain to the Cowboys, it almost feels like it's a lock that, may not be a lock, so to speak.
Let me bring back in former NFL general manager Randy Mueller here. And Randy, our first defensive player is finally picked here at number 10 by the Dallas Cowboys, and it's Patrick Surtain, the cornerback. Is he the best defensive player in this class?
I have him rated as the top defensive back for sure, but there is a kid that I like even more, and this is just my opinion. That's why, what do they say? It's why Baskin-Robbins has 31 flavors, right? Everybody gets to pick their own favorite. But my top defensive guy is a defensive lineman from Miami, Jalen Phillips. He's a one-year guy that transferred from UCLA. He's big. He can play 3, 5, 7 technique. He's also a really good athlete as a pass rusher. That's the first defensive guy I have coming off the board if I was in charge. Now, I don't know if that makes some sense. I know Miami picks ahead of where Dallas is, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the Dolphins, that they wouldn't pick a defensive player. But I'll say this about the guy you mentioned, Patrick Surtain. He comes again, and I said it earlier, from Alabama, who I think they do the best job coaching defensive backs in the country. I think you're going to get a solid fundamental guy who understands ball, who's not going to be in awe of the NFL game. He's covered NFL receivers for the last 4 years, right? They've had 4 number 1 receivers. So he's against those guys for first round picks. He's covered them every day at Alabama. I think Dallas could do a lot worse than draft Patrick Surtain, that's for sure. The other option they'd have there is J.C. Horn, the corner from South Carolina, who I know for a fact is a competitive, long, good-looking kid who will play at the NFL level and won't be in awe either. I mean, I had his dad in New Orleans, Joe Horn, as a receiver there, another guy who went on to lead the franchise in receiving for many years. So I think there's some options there. And that's one advantage to a team that is kind of leaning toward taking a defensive player. With all these quarterbacks going early in the draft, that's going to push, like you said, the top rated defensive player, or maybe the top 2, down into that range of 10, 12, somewhere in there. So you're going to get a good player picking in the middle of the first round on defense.
One of the things that I've heard that I like is the Cowboys have to be focused on defense in this draft. They've got to tie Jerry Jones down. They can't let him be, distracted by the nice shiny offensive object. They can't let him be distracted by the Kyle Pitts, even though you mentioned Pitts is probably the pick of the draft besides Trevor Lawrence. Right. He's got to focus on the defensive side of the ball. Think that's true, or is Kyle Pitts a good enough prospect that he's a difference maker and will make the Cowboys that much better.
Well, I think you always have to leave yourself a little wiggle room, right? If something crazy like that were to happen, that would be too good to pass on. But I always go back to this philosophy. There is one way to do it is to collect talent. Another way to do it is to build a team. And I think Dallas has to really focus on building their team. You'd love to be able to do it from the inside out. That you'd love to be able to have a defensive lineman be there that they really like, because that's really how they solve their defensive issues. Let's face it, their defense was historically bad. Obviously, they made changes on their staff because of it. But Dan Quinn's a solid defensive coordinator. He's going to run a defense in a scheme much like the Seattle defensive scheme, because he came from Pete Carroll. But Dan Quinn also spent time with Nick Saban. Dan Quinn was our defensive line coach with the Dolphins when Nick Saban was our head coach. So he's got a little flavor of Nick's 3-4 in his back pocket as well. So I don't think they could go wrong picking a defensive player, whether it's a corner or a defensive lineman. I would suggest picking the highest one on their board, because they've gone through and spent all year and built a consensus on these players. Let's don't let a little tiny need distract us from picking the best player available. And I think there'll be a case in point of that when it gets to them at 10.
All right, at pick number 11, we have the New York Giants. This is where Crazy Jared comes in to make his pick. And it's not that crazy. He takes the defensive end from Michigan, Kwity Paye. So Crazy Jared does join us now. And Jared, I know you take crazy as a term of endearment, the way that we refer to you in that way, right? Just so everybody else knows.
Yeah. For sure. I actively do it. And I'm working on my top 10 tight ends for Crazy Jared's draft coming up here.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, to be perfectly honest, you were a little less crazy last year, which we noted in some of your write-ups. And also, some of your craziness is actually proven to be exactly what the New York Giants ended up doing in the draft in the past. So you're crazy like a fox.
Ooh, I like it.
Speaking of crazy, you did try to trade out of this spot, even though that's something that the New York Giants never, ever do.
Correct. Yeah.
But it's also probably the smartest thing. You do end up taking defensive end Kwity Paye. I'm assuming you're hoping that fills a void for you.
Yeah, so the whole idea of this pick for me was I was watching the board. I wanted Pitts and I wanted Sewell. Neither of those guys was there for me, and there was still a quarterback on the board. So we still had a quarterback on the board of the top top 5 quarterbacks. And I thought there'd be a team out there that would want to come up and pick their quarterback of the future. So I was trying to trade out, or at least even to someone like maybe like 14 or 17. I talked to 8 different teams trying to trade out. No one would agree to trade out. So I had my choice between Kwity and Parsons, because I feel like if the Giants were forced in this specific spot where I was, they would choose the best player at one of those 2 spots. And so I decided to go defensive end, because there's only 2 or 3 good defensive ends in this entire draft, and he's the number 1 guy. So it might be still a little high for him. I think he's like a 20 to 30, or I think he's a first round pick, but in the 20s, somewhere in the 20s. But he is the best defensive end, and there is only 2 or 3 NFL talents at defensive end, in my opinion, in this draft.
All right. Where else are the Giants looking to fill? What other holes do you need to fix?
We have not had a good center, and although we'll see how Gates does this year. And then we also need a right tackle, because we'll see how we still have Nate Solder, obviously, who you're very familiar with. And Thomas struggled at the beginning of last year, but he did improve over the course of the year. I think he's going to be a standout right tackle at the very worst, but I think he can still play left tackle in the NFL. But I would still like to draft a very highly touted right tackle. So getting a Sewell or getting someone like that, or going back in the second round and picking someone up would be really nice. Like in this draft, in the second round, I went back and picked up Dickerson from Alabama for center, and I think that would be a fantastic pick for the Giants, is to go grab that center that can play for 10 years.
Why are you giving away second round spoilers? You know that we're not allowed to do that. How dare you? All right, Jared. Well, listen, I don't think your pick is all that crazy. I know Brian Bosarge and Randy Mueller have some opinions on edge rushers and Kwity Paye to add some more perspective. So I'm going to throw it to Brian, and we'll go from there. Thanks, Jared.
Yep. Take care.
Crazy Jared did try to do crazy things. He tried to trade out of 11 to 7 or 8. Other teams got all no's. I really don't like drafting in the spot unless it was Pitts, but I had to pick, so I picked the number 1 edge rusher in the draft class. Huge team need and a big need for Giants for what feels like an eternity.
Here's a fun thing about the Giants. Their GM, Dave Gettleman, has been a GM now for X amount of years, has never, ever traded down. Ever. So crazy Jared here could have traded out, but it would have been completely unrealistic to what would happen here. If the Giants stay, it wouldn't surprise me to see an edge rusher like Kwity Paye. I also would not be surprised to see them go with a receiver like Jalen Waddle. Would that be the choice there? But a name I've been hearing a lot more linked to the Giants would be the first interior offensive lineman off the board. Is Elijah Vera Tucker from Southern Cal. We'll talk about him more in a little bit here. But those are some other guys I think here. But Kwity Paye is was productive at Michigan, tested well. So he's a guy that can upgrade the Giants' pass rush for sure. It would be a good selection here at 11.
This seems like a good spot to take a break. Brian, if people are interested in more of your draft takes, where can they find you?
Everything that I do is readily available at deepfrieddraft.com. Pretty much I'll have something new going up every day for the next probably 3 to 4 weeks at least. And you can always follow me on Twitter at deepfrieddraft for immediate hot takes occasionally.
And Randy Mueller, thanks so much for jumping in. We're going to be talking to you some more. But in the meantime, if people are itchy for more draft talk, where can they find you?
Well, as you referenced a couple times, I write on my blog. It's at MuellerFootball.com. I just kind of take angles from the GM's chair. That's all I know. And so I write 2 or 3 columns in there a week for my blog, and it seems to gain a little traction. The other thing we're doing now is we do the podcast for The Athletic. It's called The Football GM. Mike Sando, The Athletic national writer, and myself known each other for years, and we do a little podcast once a week for them, and that seems to drive some listeners as well. So it's enough to keep me busy, and talking ball is really all I know. So it's been fun to hang out with you and to do those things as well.
There you go, folks. That's picks 1 through 11. We're going to strike things back up with pick number 12, and we'll go through, a few picks during that one, and then we'll finish things off with part 3, which will come out before Saturday. We'll release 2 episodes on Friday, and episode 3 will contain a major announcement that will change the future of Next Fan Up forever. And actually, I really do mean it's going to change the way Next Fan Up is for at least the immediate future. So until then, be sure you're following us wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure you tell a friend about this show. Talk it up. We're on social media at NFU Podcast on Twitter, Facebook.com/NFU Podcast. Another great way to continue the conversation. We'd love to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. Again, this is not to predict where people are going to be drafted, but who we want to see our teams draft. So that is the difference. If you disagree with the SuperFan, take it up with them. Until part 2 comes out, there you have it.
Dear friends and colleagues, saying goodbye is never easy. I believe we can all feel proud of what we have done together. And through it all, you have maintained your professionalism and commitment and remained true to the spirit of the Charter. That principle.
We go out, we hit people in the mouth.